in on time, right on the dot. Wow, sometimes I get lucky, or I'm getting better at it. This is, hey, I forgot to switch to me here. Okay, now, there I am. Welcome from a secret location somewhere in the North Woods of Connecticut. Deep in the woods on a sunny day. You usually don't see the sun coming into the studio like this. It's really quite pleasant. 70 degrees Fahrenheit here today, and I'm just stuck inside doing a live stream. Oh well. The weather has been mostly mild so far. We haven't actually got our first full freeze, so I'm looking forward to that. And let's see, I've got a new setup, so I will start by jumping you through some of that right now. First of all, it looks like this with the let's see what's different. The new Mac Studio and monitor and my equators are back. These guys to the left and the right of the monitor, these are point source. There's the tweeter and the woofer in one, which I love, and they are my go-to everyday get to work monitor that's not fatiguing. And let's see, and then down below we have the Apollo interfaces, which are new, and to the left, and that's a cable. Looks like I've circled it. That's just a little cable sitting there so I can charge up phones or a keyboard and trackpad when they need to be. And Mac Studio Max is what's going on there with a 32 gigabyte RAM and 2 terabyte internal storage, because the old iMac had, which is still here, it's right there looking dark, but it's still set up in case I need it. And let's see, I'm streaming. There's my monitor, and there's lights and camera. And there's my universal audio outboard gear, the 2 pieces of gear, and a DAT machine, which is just sitting there sadly looking lonely and left out. And then the Blackmagic ATM Pro, Mini Pro, that's actually doing the streaming now. And let's see, the Novation keyboard and Peak. And then going around to the left here, there's hiding here is a little Roland Cube monitor. One of the most handy little things I've ever had. Right now it takes the feed out of my monitor, which is feeding the audio that I'm actually broadcasting, because if I listen on the interface, I won't hear what's actually going out on the stream for sure, and I want to make sure nothing gets left out. And so that's what I'm monitoring through, which is just as a headphone amp right now. And then over here, big changes. This is my Midas M32R, which was supposed to be sold by now. And then I realized, you know what? I can get the ADAT card for that and fire up my old Focusrite as a MIDI interface, because when you put the ADAT card in, you lose the USB MIDI. And I can use it as 8 motorized faders, or 16 mic preamps and additional inputs. So it's now the synth mixer. You can't see it, but it does the same thing the old Zoom used to do, which is you can record straight to the USB stick. And I can't tell you how many things I've recorded straight to that I wouldn't have been able to do otherwise, because I didn't have the DAW fired up or some other issue. And it's a lifesaver. It's an idea saver. And then the Hydrasynth below that, the Mini Brute above that, and the Euro Rack, which is based around a shapeshifter from IntelliGel and a Cloud Terrarium from Synthesis Technology, and then a QPass filter and another IntelliGel filter, and then a bunch of fun stuff, which one day, if anybody really wants to, I can go into. And let's see, that's it. I got the beautiful skylight. That is my view. Oh, you see the guitars on the wall. That's the guitar center there, and you can't see it in this shot, but you can see it here. Is a direct box and reamp by Little Labs called Red Eye, which is an amazing all-in-one little piece of gear there. so that I can plug in a guitar and record a direct and the amp at the same time. In a press of a button, I can send it back out to the amp or send anything to the amp. In the song we're looking at today, there I am. The guitars, 2 of them were done through the reamp, and 2 of them are through the solo here is through a plugin, 2 plugins, in fact, in Luna. So where's Reason? Oh, Reason is still here. Reason's right there. And we have the same song now in both Reason and Luna as I'm migrating it across. I'm trying to finish all my construction work and parts. You can see that there's not a lot of audio here. There's Peak, the synthesizer, is recorded on this yellow track. So all the hardware tracks are recorded, and then this is the guitar that's reamped down here. Let me help zoom in there. And then a couple reverse guitars there, and then the rest is MIDI, really. And this, if anybody has followed me for very long, will know that I don't really do things the same way twice, and I don't start with much of all in the way of a template either. And I don't have a regular way of working. In this case, I have all the drums are on a stereo track from a Matt Chamberlain library. He's one of my favorite drummers, so having him here is almost the same thing as having him in the studio without the funny dress-up clothes that he brings to sessions, which is a whole nother story in itself. Let's continue. There's one thing that's on the Reason session I haven't put into the Luna session yet. Let me play it for you. It's these 4 kick drums here that got put to a track, and a little bit looks like I ramped up. I don't know why I did that. How many times have any of us looked at an old session, because this is from 2015 originally, and wondered, why did I do that? It made total sense at the time. Of course, then you get into the session and you're just moving fast and you're not documenting, and so I don't know why that's got a little volume change there. Maybe the first one I didn't want it to hit as hard, but this is side chaining lots of stuff. Let me play it for you. So that's a little transition there. Without that, it would sound like this. So you have the reverse guitar build up, and I just thought it would be more interesting if it pulsed a little. So that's a side chain as effect. It's not doing anything that's supposed to be making it so I can hear things. It's just for effect. And the way it's rigged is it's on send 7. Why did I pick send 7? I don't know. Looks like 8 was already used for something over here. I don't know what that was. Maybe that was the first attempt at side chaining from the actual drums. Then I realized I wanted it in more places where the drums weren't playing the 4 on the 4 kick pattern, so I had to make it come from its own channel. So I just dumped, did an audio record source to a new audio track and got my 4 kick drums and then pasted them around where I need them. So everything I send now to the send 7 gets ducked by that kick drum track. And anything that's sustained basically got sent, including the strings. I wonder if there's a way for me to really play what's going on. Actually, everything that's muted here are ideas that didn't make the final cut. So some of these things aren't being sent, actually. And I'm using the sweeper approach. There they are. One to extract the one to extract the CV and send out, and then to trigger the envelope on the second one, and that's my envelope shape. And it's all pretty straightforward, really. It's inverted here by the SeligAudio rack extension, so that whenever there is a sound, uh, and the kick is opening the gate. Basically, it's just opening the gate. So it's doing the opposite of what you'd think. That's why the curve is descending. So it sounds like it's punching a hole in the audio because the polarity is inverted. So all the audio that's sent to the send and out of inverted polarity is canceled. It's kind of a backwards way of thinking. I first heard about this years ago, and now I'm seeing a lot of these devices include a send mode, which is just super handy because sometimes you want to duck more than just one thing from more than just one source. I could also be sending multiple sounds beyond just that kick into this first sweeper to get the CV, the trigger. And but in this case it's only the kick, so that gives you a lot of flexibility, and I think we covered that in the last live stream in the sidechain extravaganza. If you want to look back to October for that, and that's the process of using a send was mentioned, and maybe I showed the setup, but I didn't really show an application for why you might want that. And so that's the point of me showing it now. It's like, finally, it happened organically after mentioning that in the live stream a few weeks ago. I started to work on this track, and I found that I actually needed that very effect. Happens. Some of the stuff I might not use again for years, and others I might use it on the next 5 songs in a row. Who knows? I'm not a creature of habit. I really do try to be flexible and work with what's happening at the moment and go from there. So the demo for this is a reworked song. This came about when a friend of mine I'd worked with her before, and she needed to take some demos that she had done and update them. So here's what it sounded like before. And I won't play a whole lot. This is a rough demo. It's not a final vocal, so I won't embarrass her too much. Let's start from the top, though. I want you to hear how it started, what I was given. Okay, now the new version. No vocals on this yet, but it's going for a little bit funkier and organic. I left a little of the rock element in there, but what I've done on all of these songs I've done for her so far is put an orchestral element in there. An orchestral element in the way that Electric Light Orchestra might do it, not trying to be classical rock or anything like that. Just big string arrangements, other instruments. There's French horn and glockenspiel and tubular bells on this, and a full string section. And let's see. Now, let me play you that same part from Luna so you can hear the difference. So everything's a little more saturated and compressed than the Reason version, and let me show you what's going on with that in mind. If you don't know Luna yet, it's very much an old school console approach to a DAW, or a DAW, if you don't want me to say DAW. And it has a bunch of stuff that is really designed to emulate the tape machines and consoles of the past. And as someone of a certain age might appreciate such technology, that would be me, and many others apparently too. And I think it's not just aimed at us old school guys, because it's really, it's not. I'm not trying to claim it's anything that it's not. It's just another option out there. It's not the DAW of all. In fact, it's no more inspiring than Pro Tools or Logic is to me. I still feel more comfortable in Reason, starting songs and building them up there. And it's only in the mixing stages that I've ever been let down in Reason and not able to do what I wanted to do. And the workarounds didn't quite work around to my satisfaction. For example, I did the tape workaround years ago where I created a tape plugin that was one set of controls for up to 24 tracks at a time. And you can basically do the same thing here, and I'm loving it. I also wished for years that there were versions in Reason, and there are versions here now, so I'm very happy. I've got the automation type system I'm used to. The automation curves appear on top of the audio tracks. Not really able to see that there, and I'm still learning the key commands. Let's see if I can remember how to zoom and move around. So there's the automation. It's on top of the audio file, and it's simpler than Reason. It's got one set of controls. You don't have a separate mute and solo for audio sequencer tracks versus mixer tracks, and everything's in the same order in both views. You've only had two views to switch back and forth, so it's a lot simpler in that sense, but it's less flexible. In fact, I've spent countless minutes before realizing that I could trying to do something here before realizing I've got the Reason plugin. Just fire that up and create the auto panner or whatever. What's this here? Here's one example. Oh, I needed a coloring EQ. Great, slap it on there. Works great. Over here I'm doing a leveler. Over here I'm doing an infuser. It looks like a product demo. It's really not. Those are actual things that I needed for those tracks. The rest is Luna and UAD plugins. The Luna plugins are the console approach here. Now, this is another awesome thing where I can switch all of these views at once to the API console, which I'm familiar with, so I feel right at home here. And then the tape works the same way, and we have buses, and I'm just going overboard because I'm still learning a lot of this stuff, so I'm trying maybe more than I would eventually end up doing. And one of those, ask me again in a year if I'm still working this way or not, because maybe I found that some of these things aren't contributing or are contributing in a way that I don't like. And one of the things I've noticed is with this API console, there's no output trim, so I can't keep my levels where I want to. So I'm doing this other thing that I'm kind of stumbled upon. I'm probably not the first to do this, but I've got a little clipper set to -12 because that's usually where I'm targeting all my tracks levels to be around, peaking around -12. I've got this on every track, and it's super easy to copy that and across to all tracks. And it's also amazing that I can do, let's see, let me show it to you in a place where you'll be able to see it actually work. I can group all of the channels, and then anything I do to one does it to all. And that's true with the tape machine, although you would probably do these individual. The tape machine has its own set of controls over here where you can go in and make adjustments, and then go even more fine-tune here and do actual tape machine calibration adjustments. If you know anything about those, you'll find yourself right at home being able to tweak the calibration. And of course you can add noise too. I don't. That's one of the things we did not appreciate about analog. There's also no wow and flutter or dropouts, so yay. There's no reason to model those unless you're trying to create that lo-fi effect. But for most of my applications, I just want to pick and choose the parts of the old technology to incorporate into the new. And we also have the summing buses going on, which I'm not sure they're doing a whole lot, but I'm still exploring on those. And basically, you have an input section which can include any of their mic modeling, mic preamp modeling plugins, and also MIDI instruments if you're using an instrument track. And then your utility section, which is what we know as the top of the console in the SSL world, the trim, polarity, and even a sidechain input and delay if you need it. You can adjust the left and right trim independently if you need to, which is nice. And then you don't have to use the console section. This is the only plugin that they actually have for this feature right now. So if you don't want to use API, you're probably not going to even be using this section, but it's nice you can collapse them. And I don't know what the limit to the number of plugins is. I haven't exceeded it. I'm usually a less is more guy. But I'm just starting to set up the ducking effect right now. And for some reason, I've decided, oh, that's how I'm sending it out of the channel. Because this is the kick trigger. And I was going to set that up as a part of the live stream. I may still do it. It's not exactly my favorite thing to watch somebody clumsily claw their way through a DAW on a live stream. However, maybe I'll do it. But first, let me do what I'm terrible at, which is checking in with the chat, which I've been ignoring now since we started, and see if there's anybody yelling at me or saying, I can't hear you, or anything like that. Yeah, Big Pharma Beat Maker is obviously a friend who is here to support me. Yeah, I did used to look like crap before I got the secret figured out to how not to look like crap, which I'll be happy to share later. But for now, I want to figure out this. Do I want to do that now? I'll expose how clumsy I am on this interface if I do. So I'm going to skip that for now and come back to this if anybody's really interested. But before I go, which I'm not even halfway through, so I'm already thinking of leaving. It's such a nice day out here. I do want to get back out and finish my yard work for the day. I'm working on a side project about analog drums. I'm not sure where I'm going with it. Will it be a rack extension? Will it just be a combinator? Or what? I've been trying to do it for about 10 years on and off now. I keep starting something in Reactor and then not being happy with it, and then I'm doing a combinator now, but I'm trying to get some feedback. And I also wanted just to share the process of when I do a deep dive into something. So this is analog bass drum deep dive, and all this other stuff is everything else that might be helpful while I'm working on this, which is other drum sounds. Here's a collection of 808s, a bunch of different versions of 808 kick samples from my library, and then 909s and other drum machines, other samples I have, just so I can quickly A, B, and see where I'm at. So what I'm doing over here, it's really going to be in this area. I'm doing a very crude interface because I'm trying not to get carried away with making it look pretty yet, because I don't even know what knobs are going to be on there. Some of these don't do anything. Some of these do things that that is helpful to me in my process, but maybe won't appear on the final version. And so I think what I've learned from watching other developers work is that you don't worry about the interface at all at first. And you mainly worry about what the control is going to do, not how it's going to look, or even, is it a slider or a knob? But you kind of try to find the core functions, the essential functions. It's funny, it's not any different than I would work on a mix on a song where I'm not sure what is where it's going yet. I will determine what are the essential elements, and there's not a certain number of them, but it could be the vocal's always going to be one of them. I guess there's exceptions to that if it was a novelty song where the vocal was a throwaway, and I'm thinking of something like You Know My Name, Look Up My Number by the Beatles, where that vocal didn't have to be front and center. It's important, but it's not the main thing. Otherwise, it's going to be the vocal and probably the main chordal elements, the guitars, the synths, the piano, whatever the main chords are being covered by, and the bass, and some sort of drum element. Then you might have percussion and a few little overdubs, fairy dust, and other minor things that are not essential. And I leave those out of the mix at first because I want to make sure that the core elements are all working together, because they have to work together. And that's essentially the same logic I'm applying here. I'm taking these core elements of what are the main things I need to control, what are the ranges that I need to be able to control them over, and I don't even worry about names. Names are a little bit clunky here. But the idea is I've come up with, I need it in 3 sections. A pitch section. This is kind of based on the old Simmons drums. A pitch section, a noise section, and a transient sample section, which is my new addition. Let me play you what those elements sound like with the current setup. That's the pitch. This is a noise element. It's kind of the attack, but it's not playing that full role because this is the attack. I gotta make it longer, there we go. And the noise also can be made longer and adjusted. So I'm trying to fill in the middle somewhere. This is a sine wave kick, so it's the oscillator is only down low. I don't know how well this is coming across. It's not super loud here, but you get the idea. Let's put all the elements in there. There we go. Balance them. I've got overall pitch. This isn't that different from the drum synth and Kong. I've got pitch mod, which if it's off, it's just going to be a single pitch. There's kind of like the 808 thing. There's a weird thing that happens, and Thor is the main engine for this. So there's a weird thing that happens when you go from sine to triangle, is you get a little pop, because the triangle starts halfway through the cycle, so it starts down at the bottom of the waveform instantly, and that's where the click comes from. That's why I have a filter on here. This is a great example of something. If I'm building this, and I may do it in the regular rack as a regular rack extension, but it would also work as a Gorilla Engine instrument, and in either of those, I wouldn't have that happening. I would probably have to go out of my way to try to make that happen. That's coming from the wavetable oscillator in Thor. And I'm just going between the triangle and the sine. I'm not going to the square. So this, when this is at the max, it's triangle, and when it's at the minimum, it's sine. But being able to take that click out was important, because you don't always need it. I also put a little attack control, because even just going up to 0.4 millisecond attack gets rid of that click as well. And that may be the solution if I'm making this as a combinator. It's one of those things I wouldn't need that if I was doing it in Reactor or in Gorilla Engine, but in Thor I do. And I started this in using Europa as the engine and found that I didn't have much control over the envelopes from the front panel here, so I decided to go into Thor where I can use the modulation matrix and basically modulate things by themselves well, basically the mod envelope is scaling itself, and it's double scaling itself here to get even more, and then I have a control called exponential that will control that, so I can have a more snappy envelope. Now it sounds like you're shortening the decay time, but you're actually shortening the curve. It's a lot easier to see when you're in Europa, and that's why I wanted to use Europa, but you can't control those envelopes from the combinator, so that wasn't helpful. Where I do find the exponential very helpful is with the pitch envelope. So that's a linear decay, and that's exponential. You just hear it drops down quicker. It's more like a real bass drum would do it. Actually sounds better that way. And what the pitch sweep really helps is, especially when you do it that fast, you get some upper frequencies at the front of the attack that will I would switch to small speakers here, but nobody would be able to hear it, so it wouldn't matter. But if you do switch to small speakers, you'll still hear that thump as the frequency starts an octave or more above the fundamental. So we're roughly at 50 hertz here. We can look at the spectrum and see, and we're sweeping up to at least an octave above that. Let's look and see if we can tell. Yeah, we're going from about 100 down to 50. And it's this part, the 100 part, even though it's just for an instant, that allows it to have a little more impact on smaller speakers. And the real 808 does that a little bit, but not this much. But anytime I'm using an analog drum type approach, I find that that is the essential component to getting it to sound a little bit punchier with just a sine wave. And then put some of the attack in, and that's all that's happening with the attack. This is actually 3 different samples right now as I try to find the one I want to use. And they're all linked in Kong, so that by triggering the first one, all 3 trigger. And then I have one of them, this one I just recorded the kick drum here just to get the attack. And oh, we won't be able to tell that, will we? We have to do this. So that's the acoustic kick. Then we have one that's a drum machine kick. Sorry, this one. And then one that's a sample. That one. And they're all 3 adjusted slightly differently for the decay. And then the master decay controls all of them. And the idea is I just want... So I've high pass filtered each of the 3 to remove the actual body of the kick, and then shorten the decay down here, and then blended them so that they would all work together. And I have like a 2-way control here to balance between the first and the second sample. Then I added the 3rd one and realized I can't really do that. I could possibly create one that does both, and to do stuff like that you have to do an inverted level on one, so that's 100 to 0 and 0 to 100, and then you have to make one of them only happen over the top half of the range and the other only happen over the bottom half of the range. So this goes from 0 to 100 at the bottom for the second one. So if we're all the way to the left, we have none of the second one, And when we're in the middle, we have an equal amount of both. This is not a crossfader because there's not a 3 dB down or 6 dB down point there in the middle. They actually both stay at full volume across the center and then drop on either side. So as I move to the right, then I'm losing the first one, but the second one isn't getting louder. It's already at its maximum in the center point. And that works for me better for blending samples. But to do 3 of them, I'd have to split this into thirds, and I'm not sure how I do the middle one. It might not be possible with it combinated the way it currently is. But I'll give it a shot. I think eventually, if this was a product, I would probably just, if I really felt like all 3 had to be here, I'd bounce them down to a single sample and just use them like that. And maybe put a filter on the output. Well, there's already a filter on the output. Let me play you what that does. So this is a bandpass filter. Let's put this back in the center here too, so that we have all of them. We can make it very narrow, so you can actually hear almost a individual frequency or resonance. Not sure that's useful. Maybe. Maybe not. And oh, it can also adjust the pitch of the sample. Or can I? There we go. It's just hard to hear it. You can hear it down there. It just gets crunchy. So the idea is to add controls as needed. Like, for example, I might want to be able to modulate the filter with an envelope as well. And I haven't worked all that stuff out. But the idea is to give the user all the controls they would need to build a kick drum specifically for their song. I know this isn't the end-all version of that, nor is it unique in doing that, but that's just something that I haven't found a product out there yet that does it the way I would want to do it. And I want to do the whole kit too. I want to basically start with the Simmons concept and make it modern. And I don't know if this is going to do it, but we'll see. One thing I did notice when working with this is that a big, huge change can come when you get the pitch even just a half an octave above or below the traditional range of a bass drum, which would be in the 50 to 60 hertz range. Once it's really low, it just loses all the impact. Of course, when it's really high, it just sounds silly, almost cartoonish. I also don't have any envelope to pitch, meaning that you may want it set up so that the lower pitches ring longer and the higher pitches are shorter, like a real instrument would do. I haven't decided if that's necessary yet, and that's one of those things I will be exploring as I work on this. And I'm trying to slowly build it so I don't get too far ahead and find that I need to switch the whole thing out. Well, I've done that already a few times, so that's why I'm being careful of it now. I've gotten pretty far with it and just kind of lost interest because it's really, on its own, it's not going to be a great kick drum sound. It's going to still be an analog kick like an 808, and to get those to really work, you're often adding saturation and other EQ tricks to try to get it to really sound more aggressive than it did. In full disclosure department, I had the opportunity to work with an 808 back when it was first introduced and kind of dismissed it. And I say that because I find that it's funny to look back. It's easy to dismiss things if you're not thinking creatively about them. And it just goes to show you that just about any instrument can be used in some way if you figure out how that is that it works, and what it takes to make it work. And in the case of the 808, overdriving it was what it took to make it work. And then in some cases sampling it so that you could play notes on it and make a bass line out of it took it to a whole nother level as well. So I may start to incorporate some of that into the front panel here. Saturation would be the obvious next thing to do. But until I get all of these controls worked out, and the other thing I'm doing when I say get the controls worked out, I'm determining, like, I think the pitch range is way too wide now. I'd never use it up that high. And I don't know if anybody else would either. And so I'll probably restrict that range. And the envelope decay, that could be up to interpretation. There could be some times when you might want to go. There we go. Oh, that's the pitch decay. Sorry, I meant to turn this one up. See, I don't even know my way around this. So I might prefer to have, I don't know if I'd need it that long. I can, yeah, why not? As long as the critical range, the range where you use it the most, is around the center of the knob, is usually my goal to try to do, so that when everything is reset to the defaults, there is room above and below the knob to move away from the defaults. And I'm not sure, I use this particular knob design just because I wanted a big knob and a small knob, and I wanted it to look like the original Simmons. The little knobs work well for that, but they're also tiny, and I really wish there was something right in between those two. And eventually I may come up with a completely different approach for the visuals side of things, but that is so far off in the future. And like I think that was a hard lesson for me to learn when I first started. I think it applies also to songwriting and production, where you can start to work on this instrument and then start to really get creative with the backdrop. I notice I haven't put a backdrop on it. It's just the default aluminum look, whatever this is called, gray 1, or gray 2 actually might be the default. And I haven't done anything fancy at all. I kind of have them on a grid. There's 16 clicks over if you hit shift. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 15 apparently. So I'm not even on the grid, right? Maybe 15 was my grid. Other than that, I haven't done anything to try to fancy it up, because that's a trap that you can waste a lot of time getting everything laid out and then realize I don't even want this noise section here, and all the work I've done on it is now wasted. So I try to find out whether I want this before I start to dress it up and make it fancy. In songwriting, it's happened to me the same way, where I might be starting on a song and I got a verse idea and I need a snare drum sound, and 30 minutes later, this actually happened to me once. 30 minutes later, I found the perfect snare drum sound, but I can't remember where I was going with the song. So kind of, I got ahead of myself. I think the quote that I like the best happened on a session in Nashville where somebody says, "You're picking out what to wear at the Grammys and you haven't even finished writing the song yet." In other words, you're getting a little ahead of yourself. So with product design, even if it's just a tool I'm going to use myself, I'm not going to sell it. I'll probably give this away. Like, if it's even worth, I mean, I would make it nicer than it is now, but I'll probably just be a freebie. But anyway, I didn't want to get too distracted on that. I did want to share that I usually, if I'm starting on an idea like this, I usually make a reasoned song and start to put everything into that song file. I may have some audio. This was the recording I did for of my live kick drum to get a different transient. Then I chopped it up into this many samples, 6 samples, and picked the best one and bounced that to samples. I mean, many different ways to do it, but that's all in this session. And then this was me looking at a kick drum. No, this was the triangle wave. Yeah, that's what this shows, that the triangle wave starts 100% negative. Since the oscillator for the Thor wavetable oscillator is key synced, that means every time you hit the key, it starts back at the starting point, and the starting point happens to be down at the bottom. So you get that click. It's called a waveform discontinuity, where instead of starting at this point here, where it should have started, if you didn't want to have a click added to it, it starts way down at the bottom, and so you get a click as it tries to, essentially, the speaker is trying to go from one position to another position with no time in between, which is impossible. So it generates a bunch of frequencies, and that sounds like a click. In fact, if we just did one sample all the way up or all the way down, and then zeros around it, you would get the tiniest little click sound. And it's really interesting to me that will, if it's really all the way up or all the way down, that will register as a peak all the way up to 0 dB full scale. But since it's so short, it won't sound loud at all. It'll sound quite tiny. That's a great example of a 100% transient signal with no sustain at all. Even at full volume, it sounds small, and why you usually compress things or fatten them up to give them some body, or as I like to say, make them hang around a little longer so your ear can actually perceive them. The other side to that is if this clipped, if it actually clipped and went over, we probably wouldn't hear it as clipping because there's already a click on the front of the sound. I think if I just play this, you'll hear it. There's other things playing in the background. That's the thing about Reason. That's a thing about Reason. All these pattern devices will play even though I've soloed it over there in the sequencer. So to do what I wanted to do, I need to solo the audio channel in the mixer. So that's actually, listen closely, you'll hear that there's a click rather at the very end where the recording shuts off. Let's see why. I'm guessing that the region ends before the sound decays to silence. This one is the 4th one. There it is. Yep. So the clip ends before the sound decays to silence. So we hear that as a click as well, which sounds like this. I don't know if you could hear that second one. I've lost myself. There we go. Shift Z, by the way, very handy little trick. It takes whatever you've selected and puts it as big as it can be, and then Shift Z again, it'll zoom back out. So if I wanted to zoom in on that, click on it, Shift Z, Shift Z. Go over here, work on this, come back out. I use that all the time, and if I'm trying to zoom all the way out and I'm not all the way out yet, see, it'll be easier to see here. I select a clip, then select all, and then Shift Z will zoom out so that all that is selected will fit. And boy, I've just learned the equivalent in Luna, which is not that. Oops, it's that. It's one of those. Well, I thought I had learned that. Interesting, interesting. Just when you think, oh, it's doing it to all. Oh my gosh, I'm stuck in a loop now. I know why. Hang on. This is a, talk about your double-edged sword. All tracks group oh my gosh, even the selection group will get you. Um, so the all tracks group just means whatever you do does it to everything. And that's the mode I left it in. You never want to leave it in that mode. Even the selection group, which is actually the way Reason works by default with faders and mute and solo, can be turned off, which is nice. So now if I selected these three things with selection group on and did something, they would all track. All three would move together. And without selection group, only one would move. So that's very handy because you don't always want them to move, but in Reason, they always move. I'm in a very interesting mindset right now because I'm at the point where I'm going back and forth so much. For example, this project, I'm leaving Reason up, and I'm happy to report the computer's handling it fine, by the way. I'm leaving Reason running and running Luna at the same time, both with fairly large, well, not super large. This would be a lot larger if the drums were recorded separately. At least I can turn that back now. All right. I didn't go through this. I did want to show you a few of the things that are happening on the drums. The whole drum track basically comes from a stereo mix, and I thought I would be replacing this eventually. It's just so good sounding that I haven't had to do it yet. I might have tuned that down in pitch wise. It sounds so fat and large. The toms were awesome. See where it does a fill here. So everything is mixed fine. It's a Rex loop, so you hear when it's soloed a little bit of that choppy Rex effect. That might be why I pitched it down, because if you slow it down from the original tempo, maybe I can find out if I go over here to the original Styx loop. Yeah, there's quite a bit. Oh yeah, this is all the different patterns to get the drum fills to happen. All this stuff up here is the drum part. So it wasn't preset by any means. It took a bit of work to get it to play what I wanted it to. Let's see what the original tempo was. Radio Kings. That was the Matt Chamberlain loop. And yes, I did pitch it down a half step and set the release up to full to try to get it. I don't know if this would even say what the tempo was. Oh, there we go, 93. Yeah, and my tempo is 94. Now, why did I do that? Why didn't I just slow the tempo down? I don't know. I guess I was stuck with the original song tempo. But that's the trick there, is to just lower them a half step. There's still a little bit of funkiness when you solo it. But that's something that was always intriguing to me when I was first starting out, that not every recording was super clean. And there was a lot you can get away with, in the sense that you can take a fair amount of slop if the slop doesn't affect the core of the sound. And in this case, that little bit of, I guess, oh no, it has to be run from the pattern on the track. Hang on. Let's see what some of this sounds like. I mean, to me, that almost has a nervous sound. I can hear all the slices, but I never hear that when it's all running in the track. Never. Anyway, just wanted to share that little bit of experience and encourage folks to not get so caught up in making everything sound perfect when it's soloed, because what's the quote? Nobody at home has a solo button, right? So no matter what you're doing, it's never going to be heard in solo, and that's a great way to check things and to work on things, but it's hardly a deal breaker if you can hear something in solo if you can't hear it when it's in the mix. And I know I've seen it happen as an assistant on sessions where I know there are things in there, but I've even had it happen to me where I played a demo for a guy at a big publishing company in Nashville, was doing them weekly, and came in the next week and said, how did that go? He said, here, let me play it for you. And I'm cringing because I knew that in the second verse I had played the wrong chord. I'm like, you fixed that, right? He said, nope, it's still in there. And I knew it was there. I knew where it was vaguely, and I couldn't hear it. I had him play it for me again, but I didn't ask him. He didn't remember where it was. He just remembered that he forgot about it and left it in there, or maybe he didn't forget about it. I don't know. Anyway, if I assumed that if I couldn't find it and I knew it was there and what it was I was listening for, if I couldn't find it, then why would anybody else find it? You know, you could argue that it's a subtle thing that might be negatively impacting the song, but you could also argue it's positively affecting the song. Who knows? If it's subliminal, there is no real proof or evidence that it affects people, like the old backwards masking or low-level vocal suggestions mixed in there. I always thought that was interesting, but I don't ever think that that's ever been proven to have any effect. So it's just freeing in a way to try to figure that out. It's a puzzle, or it's a paradox actually, because it's like, how can leaving mistakes in make a better record? And one way which it could happen is that you are spending your time fixing the things that are actually important and not wasting your time on the things that nobody's gonna ever notice. And so I think I will leave it there for today, and let's see if there's anything on my notes that I forgot. I gave the tour of the studio, I gave the tour of the drum module and the mix, and showed a little bit of Luna to anybody who hasn't seen it already. And I think anything that comes up will probably be covered in the next stream. Let me check the comments. Hans says solo in front. Solo in front. Oh, wait. That's where it dims everything 20 dB except for the thing you're listening to. So, yeah, I've used that before. I can't remember where. I don't think it was Reaper. Yeah, there's a few little things like that are there. I really miss the inspector in Reason when I'm in any other DAW. The idea of being able just to select things and then type a value or select multiple things and move them earlier or later or adjust their length is really super handy. I think my first post on my migration to Luna was words to the effect of, if you want to know what you love about your DAW, use another DAW. And if you want to know what you hate about your DAW, use another DAW. I think I might have worded it differently, but that's how I'm feeling now. Is you have to get out of your own little square, your own little box every once in a while and see what it's like to work a different way. And you will, of course, never find... I've gone through maybe 10 different programs starting in 1986 on a computer-based music program, starting with Total Music, through Studio Vision and Pro Tools and Reason and Master Tracks and MIDI Paint and who knows, many others, Digital Performer that I worked on at other people's studios that I never used myself. And there isn't a perfect one, and each one does some things better and some things worse. And it seems like for me, the bottom line is, can I do it at all? Is there a workaround? And a lot of people don't appreciate workarounds. They're like, well, they should just fix it. Well, the problem is they can't fix it for everybody, because one person's workaround is another person's feature. And although I'm not quite sure that came out right, uh, all to say that what works for one person won't work for another, and you think, oh, if they just made it this way, it would be perfect, but it would be perfect for you only, and maybe not for anyone else. So, with that in mind, I will be back in a month with something else to talk about, something else to play, and I'm sure something else to complain about. Until then, we'll hopefully all go make some music and enjoy doing it. Until then, go make some music.